Mystery. Our universe is full of it. Even when you believe you have scouted every location, every cave and lost sector, the universe will surprise you. Quietly orbiting Jupiter, seemingly ignored by most guardians, Europa seems like the last place to unfold a deeper mystery. But rumors have begun stirring, whispers of long-lost research, Golden Age technology, and unseen danger residing on its cold surface. Recent flybys confirm a Golden Age Braytech research station, a functioning orbital platform, but most curiously, thousands and thousands of dead Vex frames. Where did they come from? What were they seeking? What mysteries lie on Europa and beyond? Welcome back, Guardians, to another Embrace Destiny video. Kaz PhD here. Today's report follows the series we have been covering on the Journals of Clovis Bray, gifted to us recently by the Exo Stranger. If you're only just discovering the series, I do recommend you explore the rest of the playlist, as we are telling the story more or less in order. But allow me to catch you up. Clovis Bray, the man behind the creation of the Engram and exoscience, traveled to Europa in the Golden Age to seek clarity, a process he believed would help him perfect the process of transferring a human mind to an exo body. He did this because he wished to be immortal. More than merely living forever, Clovis Bray wanted his ideas, and only his ideas, to be the driving force humanity followed. At this point, Bray had established a research station on Europa using hundreds of robotic frames, discovered what he called clarity control, what we theorize must have been an artifact, a seed, similar to that found in the Lunar Pyramid, and had been joined by his granddaughter, Elsie Bray. Clovis Bray was in contact, communicating with clarity control. Apparently, it instructed him to make a gate. Bray believed this followed naturally from the messenger hypothesis. Seeking the most efficient way of interstellar contact, aliens would likely find it easier to send instructions for a message receiver or possibly a portal. The design, however, appeared to be Vex in nature. Surmising that the easiest way to make a Vex Gate was to have a Vex do it, Bray decided to plan a raid. For some time, as dictated in earlier entries, Clovis Bray was trying to learn some of the secrets uncovered by the Ishtar Collective. The Collective, another research organization during the Golden Age, had been making great success at understanding the Vex. Apparently, they were even able to create simulations of their researchers to better understand the Vex method of simulating and experimenting entire worlds and scenarios. Bray had tried hacking their databases, even tried poaching their staff, but in the end, he decided to use their own information against them. In what Bray called an outbreak, where he forced the Ishtar Collective's artifacts to exhibit, quote, expand and exploit behavior, where Rasputin intervened with frames and orbital fire, Clovis Bray was able to steal a Vex at the cost of some lives. The Vex began its work immediately, following the design and using simple materials. Bray theorized that this was because the design was old, calling for the use of lighter elements before heavy elements were formed in the universe. Not too long in the process, Clovis Bray almost died again. While defibrillating, he had a dream, or possibly a vision. A truly bizarre entry, possibly allegorical. Clovis Bray dreamt that he was a salamander, crawling on its belly. He saw animals by the water and realized he could join separate pools of water together. As he continued to do so, Bray realized he could begin controlling other creatures through their need for resources. Those who chose to follow him were rewarded. Those who didn't were beset upon by his allies. This process continued until Bray was more than a salamander. He was a controller of resources, then a controller of controllers. Finally, he met a giant wave who he felt was God, who said, "You are like me, join me." And as he did so, the wave wiped out all lower life forms. Clovis Bray believed it to be a message from Clarity Control, from the darkness, but even still, It is a challenging message to decipher. The darkness has long eluded our understanding, and even though it appears to have been speaking with us more directly quite recently, it is still a very different entity. It is often very challenging to understand its motives or its perspective. In the miasma, the nebulous cloud of possibility of what the darkness is and what it wants, any definition, perspective, or understanding we try to impart is like a small box trying to hold a cloud. What strikes me as interesting is that while it allegedly was a dream from the darkness, it almost sounds something like the gardener would endorse. Bringing species and resources together, growing stronger through collective effort, this sounds different from the winnowing, final shape, philosophy we have heard so far from the darkness. In Entry 7, Clovis and his team passed through the gate. Bray, his granddaughter Elizabeth, several scientists, and Maya Sundaresh, formerly from the Ishtar Collective, went through the gate to another 4-point in our space-time, as Bray described it, a place far away, or possibly in a parallel universe. The terrain was rocky, and the sky completely filled with the light of a blue hypergiant, Type O star. When I say hypergiant, I mean it. The size of such a star was large enough to fill the space between our sun and Neptune, whose light and heat should have vaporized the team, yet there they stood, unharmed. The environment was even, impossibly, safe for life. The team explored nearby ancient stone ruins, pierced with metal towers and flickering lines of light. The team's geologist examined the composition and found that there were no heavy elements present. Sodium, oxygen, boron, yes, aluminum even, but very little silicon. Even more impressive, the rock appeared to be 13 billion years old, having formed at the very earliest stage of the universe. Stranger still, the astronomer pointed out that a Type O star like this barely lives longer than 2 million years. They burn hot and bright for a comparatively short period of time. Looking closer, the team discovered clusters of orbiting craft and rings of particle accelerators encircling the star. The craft were moving interstellar material, and more than that, they were refueling the star. Faced with the possibility of their star burning out, someone, something, had created a star forge, a fusion smelter, keeping the star alive and building heavier materials necessary for more complex machinery. Examining the terrain further, the team found an island of living glass, fissures of deep green light, and reservoirs of white fluid. Off in the distance, lightning flashed, reminding Clovis of the Citadel ruins on Venus. There, through a Vex Gate to a distant world, standing on terrain as old as the universe, under a solar system-sized hypergiant star forge, Clovis felt disappointed. He was looking for an answer, a way to achieve immortality, and while everything here in this faraway world was impressive, he was expecting a warmer and more direct welcome. He had followed the signs, he had worked hard and sacrificed, and he really did not have a lot of time left. Gathering his wits, Bray instructed his team to collect some samples and return. Of course, for those thinking ahead, that fluid that they discovered was none other than Vex radiolaria. Also known as Vex mind fluid or Vex milk, Clovis and his team began experimenting on it. Some information, brought to the team by Maya Sundaresh, warned of toxicity and physical infection by Vex fluid, but Bray's team found possibly even more disturbing effects. The first was transformation. Exposure to Vex milk could restructure organic material and even technology to suit the Vex. Consider Asher Mir, whose fire team was trapped in the Pyramidion for some time, leaving the Jensum scribe infected with a Vex arm. Perhaps a more disturbing effect of Vex milk was the transfusion of, quote, viral semiotic signifiers. Simply put, Vex will rewire your brain. If you try to think of, say, an apple, the network of thought will be redirected to something Vex-like, such as gauge, contrast, gouge. No matter how hard you try to think of an apple, you'll arrive at the Vex response instead. In light of the dangers, Clovis Bray enacted several protocols, specifically Solcescent, Wildfire, Hex-Tempered, and Brain Stain. Digging through the annals of the Ishtar Collective, I have identified Solcescent as a Rasputin submind protocol for monitoring the solar system and handling threats. I could not find a reference to Wildfire or Hex-Tempered at this time, but if anyone has one, please let me know. Brainstained was referenced in regards to both the Dreadnought and the Truth to Power lore book. In the lore page Thetis Brave, someone had believed they were put in the wrong virtual machine, a simulated prison. The reference to the Dreadnought was a communique from Awoken Petravenge during the Taken War, warning fleets to not run a teleonomic analysis of the Dreadnought emissions. Looking closer, teleonomy is the study of an organism's purpose, such as the purpose of RNA or the mitochondria. I believe, therefore, that combining this with the mind alteration evidenced by the Vex, that a too close examination of the purpose of Vex fluid, or other infections of this type, could cause the brain to be corrupted, taken over, rewired. Entry 8. Eureka. Experiments with Vex fluid found that while it was too infectious and virulent for exominds, when it was exposed to clarity, the Vex fluid would break down, but retain clarity's reductive effect. As such, Vex milk could be passed through clarity control, broken down, but carry the effect of clarity elsewhere. In essence, Vex milk could carry the effect of the darkness elsewhere. Passing a tiny sample of this into an exomind seemed to solve the earlier loop billboard crash cycle, the breakdown of exominds mentioned earlier. An exomind, a perfect copy of a human brain with the same necessity to constantly self-correct, normally found the copy to be too perfect and would break down, wear itself out and tear itself apart like sharpening a pencil to bits. But the clarity-infused Vex fluid acted as a random noise generator in the exomind, giving it something else to focus on, correct, and prevented the exo from driving itself insane. Clovis Bray had seemingly done it. Searching for immortality, faced with the problem of early exominds tearing themselves apart, Bray had traveled to Europa, chasing whispers from the darkness. There, he stole a Vex, used it to make a gate, transported to what could very well be the Vex homeworld, stole their fluid, and infused darkness-filled Vex fluid into exos, making a stable exomind. If it weren't incredibly horrible, it would be very impressive, a remarkable feat of science. Bray commenced production immediately, using scanned copies of personnel on file, making working exos. In early days, alchemists believed that the source of the alkahest, the universal solvent, was the Philosopher's Stone. However, Clovis Bray chose to name the distant land that place with the deepest, oldest stone, the place where the dead go to rise again. Clovis Bray called it the Deep Stone Crypt. However, any celebration Bray could have would be very short-lived. While clarity-infused radiolaria seemed to solve the crashing problem, a new problem arose. DER. Dissociative Exomind Rejection. Those of you who have studied the EXO program more recently may be familiar with DER. Essentially, it means that a human mind, after a time, begins to reject being in a synthetic body. If left too long, the mind will try to break free, causing a traumatic and eventually fatal condition known as DER. To counteract this, exos have been programmed to continue to mimic and necessitate organic behavior. For example, While an exo theoretically doesn't have to eat or sleep, an organic person does. To keep the exo mind from tearing itself away from its mechanical body, like an antibody fighting its own cells, exos are made to believe that eating and sleeping are still necessary. And in fact, they are. An exo may not have to technically consume food, nutrients to survive, but without doing so, would have a mental breakdown and die. Ipso facto, exos need to do many of the same things organic beings do. The final portion of the final entry is quite disturbing, and to serve as a warning, I chose to read it in its entirety. Warning: novel prion detected in body collagen. Hypothesis: Jovian magnetosphere promotes highly abnormal protein folding. Prognosis: massive sloughing, fraying of basement membranes, loss of tissue binding, inhibited durotaxis of new cells, delamination of all body tissues into thin sheets. You will fall apart like an old book. In the end, Clovis Bray's story is a descent into madness, driven by the arrogant idea that his ideas were the only ones worth following or preserving. Clovis experimented on his children and grandchildren. He pursued advanced biological practices and medicines to keep himself alive and unwavering. When he reached the limits of biology, he turned to exoscience, chasing the whispers of darkness first found on the moon, under the lunar pyramid. Clovis made his way to Europa. There, he constructed a research station and a Vex Gate. His team traveled to another point in space, possibly another dimension, found universe-old infrastructure, a star forge as large as our solar system, and more Vex. Bray realized that he could infuse Vex fluid with darkness, clarity as he called it, and it would carry on the transformative effect into an exo, solving it from crashing, allowing for the upload and preservation of a full human consciousness. However, despite all of his efforts, all of his science, and his belief in what he was doing, despite all of his sacrifices and sacrilege, Clovis Bray ultimately failed. Exos are not immortal. With one problem solved, a new one arose, and exos still find themselves having to reset their lives, their memories, to physically survive. Bray's legacy cannot, will not, and did not live on unchanged. What we have learned here is quite shocking. If these entries are to be believed, Clovis Bray, the man behind many of humanity's technological marvels, was only able to create viable exos through an infusion of Vex fluid and the darkness. If true, it may explain why many exos dream of a cold, desolate world, empty, yet full of death, with a foreboding tower in the distance. It would mean that every exo you encounter is equal parts Vex, darkness, as well as Braytech. While philosophers like Ulan Tan would preach the symmetry, the inherent balance of light and dark, the necessity of one for the existence of the other, it is a chilling thought to imagine that all of our exo friends contain mind-altering Vex fluid and the power of the darkness. This is as far as the deciphered logs go. In fact, the last few pages are torn. I do not know why the stranger has returned. I do not know why she entrusted me specifically with these entries. But perhaps it was because she knew that I would pass them on to you. If rumors are true, and Guardians may find themselves touching down on that cold, Jovian moon, we need to go fully armed. Not just with weapons, not just with the light, but beyond, with knowledge, wisdom, and caution. I hope that you have found this series helpful, and that it helps prepare you for what's to come. We all have to make our own decisions, so I will leave that to you. I hope this not to be my final transmission, but the future is the undiscovered country, the unknown. So who knows when our paths may cross again. As always, Guardians, I ask that you be safe, be kind, and be brave. Kaz PhD, signing off.